If we flip the script, instead of having our content be the way the system has it and trying to reach, the younger generation, why don't we flip it and create content in the way that the younger generation consumes it? We have to look at things from the perspective of the consumer, and we're not doing that well.
These people are pretty smart. When a guy comes up and they're like, I don't trust the mRNA vaccines because I prefer things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine because of the problem. It's like, well, he's not an idiot. He's not stupid. Now, I think he's got a lot of incorrect information, but the capacity for remembering stuff is there. One of the funniest this one actually saddest things is that for my life has been doing content creation. I've been a YouTuber streamer for, 16, 17 years now. And as the political situation has changed in the United States, I was a professional gamer, and then I got into kind of politics more around 2016, as so much of the world did. But I've noticed as I'm analyzing politics, I just try to think of more and more things as a YouTuber, because it really is influencer politics. And it's so funny because I look at these hearings or whatever, and they're so similar to a lot of the political debates I do. And you mentioned the whole getting cut and clipped and everything. And one of my fans had the suggestion once of when you do debates, you should go in, with a giant clock, on your chest, so that if anybody ever cuts something, you can see the time skip around or whatever.
Funny. And no, look, I think you're saying something to me that what it triggers in my mind is, what if we flip the script? Instead of having our content be the way the system has it and trying to reach, the younger generation, why don't we flip it and create content in the way that the younger generation consumes it? We have to look at things from the perspective of the consumer, and we're not doing that well.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue, the reason why we lost the election is not because the majority of people don't agree with what we're trying to do, but just we didn't reach the consumers in a way that they're used to being reached. I think we did that wrong, and I think we need to learn from that. So I commend you. I commend folks like you. I have a 21-year-old at home and a 19-year-old at home. Mm-hmm. And I try to look at the world from their lens. And I remember, especially during the election cycle, how ineffective I felt we were, because the 19-year-old and 21-year-old at home were not hearing the messages that I was saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talk about this a lot. I think one of the big brutal things that the left kind of messed up on over the past couple of decades was this. One was the assumption that we won the culture and it's done, so we don't even have to justify our positions. And the second was, well, right-wing points are just easier to sell than left-wing points, because the right wing is simpler and the left wing is more complicated. And, there are these people that... and I've gone through so many changes of mind where these people are all idiots, to where, these people are pretty sophisticated, they just get the wrong information, to these people or whatever. And, and I really look at them and I'm like, these people are pretty smart. When a guy comes up and they're like, I don't trust the mRNA vaccines because I prefer things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine because of the problem. It's like, well, he's not an idiot. He's not stupid. Now, I think he's got a lot of incorrect information, but the capacity for remembering stuff is there. They know it. And the right has spent, my mom is Cuban. I grew up very conservative. Okay, I was a rider. We cried when Elian Gonzalez. Yeah, we cried when Elian Gonzalez. My mom. I read. I think you learned in kindergarten, first grade Spanish. My mom came over. She learned in school, awesome. And so we grew up crying when Elian Gonzalez went back, and hated Clinton and everything else. And to just to see how people on the right have spent so long honing the entertainment apparatus. Growing up and listening to people like Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage and Glenn Beck, and these guys were funny, they were entertaining, they bullied callers, and then, the stereotype for the left was the NPR voice, right? The boring, factual, whatever stuff. And it's funny because our most successful media figure, and he didn't really want that mantle, and we never recognized it, but it was really Jon Stewart for millennials, for left-leaning political education. It shouldn't have been, but it was. And I think finally it's taken a while, but I think I look at people like Gavin Newsom. I look at people like, you talk about the pivot to the important topics. He's further left than me, but Mamdani is so good at that in speaking. And I think the left is finally starting to get there. But that messaging is so important. And then one more thing, because you mentioned the clipping and everything else. There was a world where I'm sympathetic to people politicking. So somebody's on their side, they've got to bully you. You're on your side, you got to fight with them. And behind closed doors, you're more friendly than it seems. And I could accept that world when there was a point to it. But it seems like now there's this simulacrum of showmanship, to where the clips are done. And that's it. It's just to make the attention on the clip. And that's it. There is no real policy goal anymore. No. There is no aim. It's going through the government with a sledgehammer, destroying as much as you can.
It's performative. It's performative. It really is. And I remember having dinner with Senator Burr at the time, North Carolina. He was like a ranking member of the Education Committee in the Senate. And this was early on, and we were talking about the important things that we agreed on. And I don't agree with a lot of his policies, right? But what he said was, look, there's extremes on both sides. How could we move the needle for education and the things that we know we could do? Like, college career pathways, mental health, or making sure students had access, right, to higher ed. Now, how to get there, we would disagree, but let's focus on those things. Let's not let it be a circus. He's no longer there. Even that side realized, if you're not going to be part of this performative circus, you're not going to have a place. And you mentioned before a couple folks who are in politics, whether it's Mondani or Governor Newsom, they're just talking in the language of the consumer. And we've lost sight of that. And I think part of it is we became too righteous, and we're fighting each other and not realizing we're getting swarmed, right? And I think what we have to do is really just kind of realize where we are, and we're missing an opportunity with our young generation. We're missing an opportunity with Latinos to talk about the values, right? And we saw that in the results. We got to wake up, or we're going to see more of this, and we got to be on offense, not defense. And in terms of education, one of the things I'm really trying to focus on now is, where is our common ground? What do we think? I say it's not a red or blue issue, it's a green issue, right? Economic mobility for our kids matters, man. We want our kids to be able to get out of high school and have options. I'm from Connecticut, and we have a submarine base over there. And, whether it's left or right in DC, it doesn't matter. Defense contracts, we want our students to have those jobs. And we want them to be making the dollars, but our schools, are they aligned to give our students preparation for that? And what are we doing to make sure that our kids have access to that our higher education institutions are working with our industry partners to give students those opportunities to make higher education relevant and make it worthwhile, make sure that the return on investment is there because the careers are there. And I think we have work to do there. That's not a blue or red issue. I say it's a green issue because it's economic stability, not only for the students, but for the state. Which state doesn't want, microchip manufacturers knocking on their door saying, can I set up shop here? Because your school systems are feeding the employees that I need. That's the work that I'm trying to focus on. I was trying to do it in DC with limited success because I think red or blue, we can't work with Biden in the state because, then Trump's going to get mad at us. But right now, I think there's an appetite for this across the country. And I think, quite frankly, if you get a lot of Republican leaders in a closed door without a camera on, they're going to say, I'm just tired of this nonsense. I want to make sure that we can do what's right for our kids, regardless of where it comes from.
So again, from streamer world, one of the most frustrating things that I would deal with is, so your biggest fear, this might actually map onto maybe your life. Have you ever had the moment where you wake up and you've got like 30 text messages or emails and they're like, are you okay or whatever?
Yeah.
Oh God.
What happened?
Oh no. What just got published? What just went live? And it was funny because the messages that actually bothered me the most were people who would shoot me a message on a DM or email or whatever. And they'd be like, hey man, I saw what's going on. Like, I just want you to know that I support you privately or whatever. And I'm like, well, what does that do for me? If you're not going to say anything publicly, why do I, I guess the thought is nice, but it's like at the end of the day, if nobody's going to say anything, well, that doesn't really help me much. That one of the I really want to I'm going to get back to what you just said before, but the thing you mentioned about there being obvious answers to things, like all of us should want to make more money, or have our children make more money, or have the careers aligned. I think some of the saddest stuff that I read, you're familiar with the super tragic drownings of a lot of the people down in Care County, a lot of children when that flood happened. I went back and I watched and then read through a lot of the transcripts of some of the hearings. I think it was Care County or Kerr County or whatever, when they were talking about I think it was the American Rescue Plan funds. Yeah. And they had millions and millions of dollars sitting in these accounts. And this is a lot of money that we're talking like small, like population, I think like 5,000 towns. Okay. So lots of money for these towns. And they didn't want to spend the money because they were worried that if they spent it, it would give Biden the right to come and steal their homes, or it would give the federal government the ability to like enforce DEI on their policing force or whatever. It stuff, and this was like some of the most no strings attached money. Like it was just sitting in a bank account to be spent on whatever they wanted it to be spent on. And one of the things that I worry about, and this gets into a very kind of like politically elite question, is like, do you ever wonder if maybe it would be good sometimes if less people were interested in this topic, because so many people have become interested in it who just don't have the interest of like the actual topic at mind, but more of it's just another battlefield for politics to happen on.
And that's why I was talking about like, let's not politicize education. And that sounds Pollyannish. But no, you're absolutely right. That's an example. That's sad. If in fact there were dollars there that were attributed to Biden, we can't use Biden dollars or else it's going to make us look bad. Or
people done the same with FEMA funds.
We're going to piss off the right. We're going to piss off. That's crazy. It's very similar to, when we were distributing $190 billion in ARPA, right? Rescue Plan dollars for schools. The goal was academic recovery, mental health support, and getting your facilities to the point where you can reopen schools while the pandemic is there. A lot of people forget. It was not closed during the Biden administration. They were reopened during the Biden administration.
Oh my God, yeah.
46% of our schools were open full time when I became Secretary of Education on March 2nd, 2021. 46% of our schools were open full time.
If I had $1 for every time somebody talked about how Biden shut all the schools down.
By November, we had 97% of the schools open. Those ARPA dollars were distributed in March of 2021. There was a state, I'm not even going to name it because I'm honestly, there was a state, you had a certain amount of time to start using those dollars. And it was like the last week. There were kids suffering. There were kids not in school. There were kids not getting the support that they needed. They did not use the dollars because this person had a governor that had national ambitions. And they didn't want to use those dollars. They were the last state to use it. And they did use it before the deadline. But it was because I was nudging, my department was nudging, hey, there are kids in your state that need help right now. You're reading, there's kids that need, use the dollars to help kids. They did, because the headline would have been bad, that there's money, sitting in coffers while kids are struggling and families are struggling. But that's the culture that this division is creating in our country. And we got to rise above that.
When you look at where you place kind of the responsibility for the political climate right now and how everything is so clipped and consumed and made for entertainment consumption, I guess, to the public, are you looking at kind of being upset with the public, the culture, kind of like the DC people, the mainstream media, alternative media? How do you factor all of this in your mind when you're like, this is like frustrating me?
Now this takes 0% of my education training or my degree. So I'm just a person with an opinion here, right? I think it sells, right? It sells. Nobody was going to turn on a TV to hear about how the $190 billion went to feed kids, provide reading teachers for kids that were struggling, help incentivize people getting into the profession. Nobody's going to run a piece on 60 Minutes about how an increase in Pell Grant gave this child an opportunity to be a first-generation college student. That doesn't sell. So there's an aspect there. There are people whose political career thrives on division and creating fear-mongering. So there's the political element there. And I think, and I say this respectfully, but DC, when you're in the bubble, you think your impact is greater than it really is, right? So you think people in rural, Nebraska care what you think more than they really do. They're just trying to make ends meet. So there's this bubble there where it's almost self-absorbed, right? And their talking points, they think that the whole world is listening. It's really not. So it's that self-aggrandizing in DC. There's the media component where people are not going to tune in if it's not creating fear or division or clickbait. There's that. And then there's people whose career is defined by thriving off this turbulence that they create, right? It's like the person that wants to be a firefighter starting a fire so they could put out the fire and be the hero. There's a little bit of that as well. I don't know. And again, that's just my opinion. That took 0% of my, what I went to school for, my experience. So I want to be very clear that that's just me speaking as a consumer of the media. Somebody
a victim
observing.
to some extent as well.
Yeah,
right?
and then of one. That's it.